like the fucking loony bin, right? Then I'd make the switch to Threads. But for now, I don't need another Twitter. So I'm not going to be signing up for it. I'm not exactly, scratching at my neck for more of that experience. But like I said, competition is great, and I do hope Threads can at least threaten Twitter enough so that way both can improve. So that way you're not stuck with constant dog shit changes that make the user experience worse. Most important thing to remember about competition, that it is always the best thing for consumers. You want competition. This isn't me trying to hypnotize you, I'm telling you a fact. You want competition. You don't want one entity to have all of the power when it comes to a market share like this. So it's good. But I don't like Twitter, so I'm not making a Threads account for more Twitter. But I'm out here rooting for it, even though it is one of Meta's. But at least now you get the choice. Do you want to stay on Twitter, or do you want to go to fucking Mark Zuckerberg's booby here and suckle on that for the Twitter experience? You get choices now. And since I don't have a Threads account, I've just been reading people's personal accounts of the site. Apparently they're not allowing like pornographic material, and they're also like censoring people, like individuals. I don't know how true these claims are right now because I'm getting conflicting information from different sources. And if both of these claims are true, the censorship is a big L, but not having it constantly feeding you pornographic material, I actually think is a good thing. I don't know if that's a hot take or not. I was talking about this on stream last night. I never stopped to think about just how weird it was that Twitter's a platform that you have to be 13 or older to sign up for, and it just has porn plastered all over the place. And it's super common, especially in replies. And this is a platform that is, again, 13, which is below the legal age for porn consumption, which is 18. And it just wasn't even something I even thought about until a couple people on Twitter started mentioning it, and I was like, huh, that's an interesting point. And the majority of the time, it's not age-gated at all. You just immediately get fed the content with no, like, safeguard in place or anything. You'll read a goofy tweet that you're giggling about, such as the timeless classic, dude walked into the pee store and said, "Is this the poop store?" It's like, brother, look around. And you're, busting a gut laughing at it, having an old belly laugh, and then you scroll into the reply section to see who else is laughing with you, and then bang, just a full picture of a gaping, leaking butthole. And an OnlyFans link. And it's like, what the fuck? So yeah, I'm not exactly going to be crying about the lack of porn on Threads if that is the decision they decide to make. But I did look up some complaints that a couple of articles have noted, so I'm just going to go through those real quick, because again, I'm not making an account on Threads right now, so I don't know firsthand what the experience is like. According to this article, you can't set Threads to view only posts from accounts you follow, which, again, this just feels like they rushed it out and just didn't bother putting this in yet, but will be coming shortly if I had to guess, because this is a pretty obvious one that they'd need to have set up. There's also no web interface, but you can read the threads on the website, but you can't post them or interact with them in any way. And apparently you can't delete your Threads profile without deleting your Instagram, which seems like a pretty big oversight, but it seems like something a lot of people will have an issue with down the line. According to the quote here, you can deactivate it, but you can't delete it without, also annihilating your Instagram account. Also, there's no search functionality right now in Threads. It only lets you find user accounts, so they do say that they'll be adding more features to help discovery, obviously. That's very clear. This is just a rushed job getting it out, so it doesn't have all the features at the moment. And then the other thing is that it's not currently available in the EU, which I imagine it will be shortly. But yeah, anyway, like I said, even if I'm not making a Threads account right now, I am happy that there is competition in the space, and hopefully it can be a legitimate competitor to Twitter. So yeah, that's really about it. So yeah.
Ang Jollibee Chicken Joy, crispy-licious, juicy-licious, Philippines' best tasting.
When you think of a hero, the first thing that pops in your head is probably like Spider-Man or Iron Man or something. But for me, when I think of a hero, I think of anyone who has to work in retail, food service, reservations, any job where you have to interact with a customer. Those are the real heroes. I have always said and always will say that any job that requires you to interact with customers is an absolute nightmare. Hell on earth. You're constantly experiencing the worst humanity has to offer every single day. swallowing rusty nails would be less painful. And I think that's something that everyone on this planet can agree on, that rude customers are the lowest of the low. I have more respect for cockroaches than I do some douchebag that's melting down in public, yelling at an employee over something they had no control over in the first place. It is one of my biggest pet peeves. In fact, I'd say it's probably my biggest pet peeve. I hate that shit. And today there was a video that was going pretty viral on TikTok about a guy who posted his own meltdown at GameStop, and it is so embarrassing I couldn't help but just talk about it a little bit today. Let me show you it.
Hey, what's going on, man? Listen, I'm recording you just because I've had the hardest.
He's the 16-year-old. He's like the charismatic one in the family. He's calm, but he has this like energy when you meet him. You're already spilling your life secrets, like your deepest fears, what you want to become one day, and you're like, why did I just tell this random boy that I just met all my deepest fears in life? I think he was just very warm and comforting. People felt inclined to open up to him when they saw him. He also never judged anyone. In fact, he would find a way to relate to you so that you don't feel alone or weird. So he's 16 at this point, and he tells his parents, I'm going to continue working hard at school, and I'm going to grow up, and I'm going to be a lawyer. This is a huge commitment to make at 16 years old, but he was down for it. Okay, I don't know, just reading about Louis, he seems like the type that I would be very intrigued by. Like, he's very smart, but he's also very creative. He plays the guitar, he likes to read and draw. So that's Louis, the youngest of the family, boy. His older sister's name is Gwen, and she was really the studious one, like the super smart one. Like, Louis is smart, but Gwen is intense. For example, she was a Girl Scout as a kid. And you know how they have those, like, sashes that they wear? Her sash was filled with badges and pins. There wasn't even a single space left for an extra pin. She completed every level of the Girl Scouts program in her free time, basically for fun. And she's like, wow, I kind of need more challenge. So in high school, she enrolls for this pre-med prep school at the local university for high schoolers. She's like, I'm going to grow up and be a doctor. So I don't know what the McGuads did, but they've raised their kids right. Like, one wants to be a lawyer, one wants to be a doctor, and they're both really upstanding, moral kids. She also volunteered in her free time. Okay, I swear, she's like a college acceptance administrator's dream candidate. And yeah, I probably want her to be my doctor, okay? She's really approachable. If you happen to be at a gathering of any sort, like a party, you're feeling extra shy, uncomfortable, you're like, I don't know a single person here, I'm so nervous. She would sit with you and keep you company the whole time. Okay, you know how some people will come and sit with you and they'll chat you up, but the minute that someone more interesting comes in or a friend of theirs comes in, they ditch you. They're like, okay, bye, have a good one. Gwen was not like that. She would sit there until you were comfortable. She would be there with you the whole freaking time. That's how she meets Janice, her best friend, and now adopted sister. The McGuads are really well liked, and they're constantly being invited to these social gatherings. Now, one of their close family friends had a live-in nanny that would tag along to all these dinners and parties and just kind of run after the family's kids. So she's a live-in nanny for one of the McGuads' family friends. So she's brought to these parties on a working basis. You know, she's running around looking for the little kids that she's supposed to watch. And there's a bunch of other teenagers there that are just teenagers, like Gwen and Louie. They're there because it's fun and it's a Saturday, but she's working. And Gwen noticed her on more than one occasion. Mainly because, you know, Gwen's like, she looks like my age. She must be my age, but wow, she's working. So Gwen strikes up a conversation with her, and they instantly click. Janice is a year younger. She's 17. Gwen just turned 18. And the two of them are, like, attached at the hip after the first time they start talking. Their favorite thing to do, this is, like, their go-to. Whenever Janice could get off work for a few hours, they would come up with these elaborate photo shoot sets. And they would, like, hang up sheets in the backyard and do these fancy little backgrounds. They would set up the little string lights. They would try to time it with golden hour, and then they would do each other's makeup and hair, and they would spend hours just goofing around trying to take pictures of each other. They also really enjoyed filming TikToks together, just of them dancing. It's really cute. It seems like they're really close friends. They kind of look a little shy doing the dances, but Louis is really cute and charming. Okay, in a way that little brothers typically seem to be, he's like sticking his hairy leg out to block the girls when they're dancing, and they're all like laughing and swatting his leg away. So the three of them, they look very comfortable with each other. So it's like once they're comfortable, Gwen feels like she can finally ask, you know, question, like, why are you living nanny for this family? Like, you don't seem to enjoy it. Do you need to make money for your parents? Like, what's going on?
Let's go.
You can tell me, or if you don't want to, you don't
World
have to tell
record, let's
me.
go.
Janice opens up and she says, well, I don't have parents. And she starts walking Gwen through her life story, and it's pretty heartbreaking. Janice said her first real memory started when she was like 8 years old. Before that, she doesn't really remember much. She just remembers she's 8, and a stranger found her wandering around a ship by herself, like a giant boat. Not even like a cruise, like I'm talking like a shipping container boat. Her parents were nowhere to be found. I don't know, they may have lost her, but more likely Janice believes that they just completely abandoned her. The stranger was nice and thankfully not a child predator, because they helped post Janice's name and picture on Facebook. Okay, I don't know if that's a good idea, but you get it. And they were posting on online forums to see if her parents were looking for her. Nobody ever responded. Finally, Janice is dropped off at the Philippines version of CPS, the Department of Social Welfare and Development. We're just going to call it DWSD. And that's where Janice stayed. So she's bouncing around from home to home. And then recently, she was offered a job as a live-in nanny for this young family. And she took it. Okay, so she hates the job. She hates it. But don't get me wrong, she's so grateful for this opportunity. I mean, to have like a family take her in and let her live with them, that's a great job. You know, it's sad though. She like gets to see these young kids live this amazing life with a family that care about her. She sees Gwen and all the teenagers at the gatherings being, you know, teenagers. They have stress, but it's different. They have parents to comfort them. She told Gwen one of the things that she wished for the most growing up. She just wished that she could run around with kids. She wished that when she was running around, she would fall down, scrape her knee, and she could just have a mom to run to that would hug her and put her on her lap and blow on her knee and tell her, it's okay, I got you. I mean, even now, Janice said she wished that all she had to worry about was getting good grades and getting accepted into college and not getting fired and being without a home and having nothing to fend for herself. So Gwen is really emotional when she hears Janice's story. I mean, for one, she had come to see Janice as her sister. So to hear about how hard her life was, I mean, it was rough. But another reason was, I'm sure it touched on the privilege that Gwen felt like she had. To know that she was lucky enough that she could always depend on her parents to be there. So, like, side note, Gwen's parents, they're not like free-for-all parents. They're not showering her with amazing, luxurious items and, like, letting her do whatever she wants. Just because they were doing okay didn't mean that they were spoiling the kids. Each member of their family, they had their own set of chores. Everyone had to pitch in. The kids had to study. They had to get good grades. Everyone had to be responsible. They had to go to church on Sundays. Like, there were a lot of rules. They were actually pretty strict parents. But Gwen and Louie had come to really respect their parents for that. They really were raised really, really well. Like, I think the fact that Gwen and Louie are even comfortable enough to ask their parents to adopt Janice, that just shows you how tight they are, how close they are. So Janice moves in. She gets formally adopted, okay? She moves into Louie's room. He moves out. He's permanently on couch duty now. And from the moment that Janice moves in, everyone treats her like family. They wanted her to feel like at home. They enrolled her in a school immediately. I mean, she had all this room to breathe now. She didn't wake up every single morning to worry about work and putting food on the table. She was just a kid. She said for the first time she had the luxury of daydreaming about her future. Like what her dreams are gonna be, what she wants to be when she grows up. She had never done that before. So after moving in, the three siblings, they get closer and closer. They kept doing their photo shoots, hanging out all the time. Janice even went on vacation with the McGuad family for the first time. So, really close. Now, I do want to make it clear. Not everything was sunshine and rainbows. I'm sure any adoptive parent will tell you that it's freaking hard when a new child has to get accustomed to their like new environment, learn the rules, and even just to trust the adoptive parents. It's a long process. There's this long, hard grace period you have to go through. And it's completely normal for there to be hiccups along the way. You just have to be open about it, which the McGuads were. I really do think that them being educators helped them in this whole process. They were always patient and understanding. So Janice's first hiccup came a few months after her adoption. The McGuad family had land and a few pigs that they were raising on this land. So they have little pigsters. And Cruz sold one of these pigs for about $200 US. He takes a little cash, it's a bunch of small bills. He puts it in a little cash jar in the primary bedroom because he knew that, I don't know, maybe he'll need it for an emergency one day. The same month, his elderly parents test positive for COVID. Now, in the Philippines in 2021, there were these quarantine facilities that you have to go to. So at least in this area. So his parents, they're being quarantined in a government facility and they would need money for food and supplies while they were stuck in there. Cruz is like, okay, perfect. I knew that $200 was going to come in handy. He runs to grab it from his little glass jar, and it's freaking empty. It's gone. He's like, that's so weird. So he asks his wife, hey babe, like, have you seen the money? She's like, no, why would I touch the money? He asks his kids, and they're like, no, I haven't seen the freaking fake money. Like, why would it, where, what? He's like, okay, well, do you guys know where it would be? Everyone's shrugging. They have no idea. They all start helping Cruz search for the missing money. Cruz even wondered if maybe thieves had gotten into the house to take the money, but that didn't make sense because nothing else was stolen. And usually someone was home, so wouldn't they have known? They also have these big dogs that bark like crazy at strangers. So he's genuinely puzzled by this. It's like, this is a case of missing money. This is mind-boggling to me. The family look around for hours. You know, the family is doing well enough to feed the kids and everyone. They're financially stable to a degree, but they don't just have a ton of extra money laying around. So Cruz really was counting on this $200 to give to his parents. He needed it. They're doing everything. Couch cushions, under the refrigerator, under the stove. They're turning over all of the rugs. And one of the kids picks up Janice's backpack. Not because they think it's in Janice's backpack, but to search the ground underneath Janice's backpack. Her backpack was suspiciously heavy. Again, he had received small bills for the sale of the pig, including, I believe, like heavier coins maybe. And so it's not just like two $100 bills. They're like, oh, that's weird because we're doing remote learning. We don't really have a lot of textbooks in our bags right now. So they thought, what the hell? Why is her backpack so heavy? But they didn't accuse her. They just kind of glanced at Janice, and she saw the kid, her sibling, holding her backpack, and it was just, the look of guilt was so clear on her face. It was clear as day. She confesses. Turns out, Janice had a secret compartment that she made in her backpack. So you know the bottom flap of your backpack, you open it up and you look inside and you're like, oh, that's the bottom of the backpack. Well, she undid the seam, created a little empty space between the fabric and the actual inner lining of the bottom of the backpack, hid the cash in there, sewed it back on, basically creating a false bottom for her backpack. Very crafty. But the crazy thing is, and this is why I'm like, I don't know if I can be a parent because it takes so much patience and understanding, because I'd be like, why'd you do that? That's crazy. But Chris wasn't even angry. He was disappointed. He's human. And her new family, they all looked at her confused and disappointed. But Janice was breaking down. She's like, I'm so sorry. I don't even know why I did that. Like, I know you probably hate me now. It's awful. I'm so sorry from stealing from you. Please, like, I totally get it. If you want to kick me out of the house, if you want me gone, like, I get it if you never trust me again. But please, I'm just so sorry. I really don't know why I did that. The McGuards were hurt, but they also kind of understood. So Janice had grown up with nothing. She didn't have the security that the McGuad kids had grown up with. And side note, stealing is actually very common in families with recent adoptees, especially with money and food. It comes from the child's scarcity mindset. So, I mean, think about it. If you never know where your next meal or money for your next meal or even shoes or socks is coming from, and now you're suddenly in a place with an abundance of food, of course you're gonna think, I should probably grab some more so I can save it for later when I inevitably need it again. There's no way you're just going to take it for granted immediately and be like, this is my life now, unlimited food. These children truly believe this family's going to let them go, they're going to face scarcity again, and they need to stock up. I know it's messed up that she stole the money, but it's kind of heartbreaking when you think about the psychology of why an adopted child might steal from their new families. So yeah, the McGuads were disappointed, but they got it. They understood. And it didn't matter to them because it's like when your kid makes a mistake, what do? They're still your kid. And Janice is their kid. That's how they thought about it. Janice is our daughter. Of course, we're not going to turn our backs on her because she did something wrong. She just needs guidance. So after this little hit, the family focuses on rebuilding that trust. And it wasn't this, Janice, you made us lose our trust in you, so earn it back. It was more so the McGuads trying to comfort Janice, to reaffirm in her belief that they're family now and she never has to worry about food for as long as all of them live because she's family. After this incident, the family actually come out stronger than before, more bonded together. Gwen started tutoring Janice when everything went into remote learning. And December 10th of 2021, before the McGuad parents left for work, Janice turned to them and called them mom and dad. It was supposed to be a very, very, very good day. But there was a problem. Janice, their adopted daughter, whom they thought was legally categorized as an orphan, meaning without parents. Well, it turns out, Janice wasn't even an orphan. In fact, she was regularly communicating with her mom on Facebook.
What?
So what the hell is going on here? Back to the day of the murder, December 10th of 2021. I'm not sure how Cruz's coworker knew that the family home had been ransacked. Maybe he saw Janice's Facebook post or someone he knew had seen it. But Cruz rushes home, finds 2 of his children dead in the living room. He tries to check if there was anything, a small pulse.
Failed to connect to the server. You are not whitelisted. But I am whitelisted. Failed to connect to the server. You are not whitelisted. But I am failed to connect to the server. You are not whitelisted.
Or anything, but there was nothing. It said Cruz dropped to the ground and he cried out. He's religious. He cried out, "Lord, why did you have to take both of them? Why do I have to lose both of them?" Dropped to the ground, or dead in the face. Oh, it's her mom on here. Back to the day of the murder, December 10th of 2021. I'm not sure how Cruz's coworker knew that the family home had been ransacked. Maybe he saw Janice's Facebook post or someone he knew had seen it. But Cruz rushes home, finds 2 of his children dead in the living room. He tries to check if there was anything, a small pulse or anything, but there was nothing. It said Cruz dropped to the ground and he cried out. He's religious. He cried out, "Lord, why did you have to take both of them? Why do I have to lose both of them? Why?" And then he collects himself as best as he can because he's still a father. He has to look for his 3rd child. So he's scrambling and he's praying that he wouldn't stumble across another dead body. And he calls her name out and finally he hears like the creaking of a door, like when you crack it open. And he hears her voice and he screams, "Janice!" And he runs to her room and he's putting his hands on her head and shoulders and arms and he's frantically checking all over her to see if she's hurt. She wasn't hurt, but she's dripping wet. And for a split second, he was panicked that it was blood. But it wasn't. It was water. We're going to come back to this
His
detail.
clothing too?
Her hair is like soaking wet in water. He made sure that she was okay, rushed them out, and he kept asking her, "Are you sure you're okay? Are you hurt? Why is your hair wet? Are you sure it's not blood? Are you bleeding anywhere?" Janice is like hyperventilating. She's explaining 3 men came into the house. They attacked Gwen and Boy Boy. She had enough time to run into her room. She hid under the bed. She was so terrified. The screams were so loud. There were so many screams. She was so scared. She knew that she couldn't help her siblings and she didn't know what to do or how to even do it. And then finally it went silent. She didn't know what to do. She was so stressed. She was having a panic attack. So the only thing that she could think to do in the moment was take a bath.
Take a bath?
Yeah, okay, so this whole bath thing is interesting, but we're gonna come back to it, okay? It's just very odd, because, I know what you're thinking, and maybe we're on the same page, let me know, but I feel like a bath is very vulnerable. Like, when you're in a bath, you're naked and in a slippery, wet tub, defenseless. It just feels like the last thing you want to do in a situation where your environment doesn't feel secure. But again, people grieve differently. They respond to shock differently. Maybe she was in a state of shock where even her brain wasn't registering because, our brains like to protect ourselves.
Yeah, I can't imagine like bath and shower, because even shower, like you close your eyes, you're in the water, you can't hear things well.
And then you got to get the towel. Like, that's a horror movie.
And then bath too. It's just not, none of that makes sense.
And then the water filling up the tub is really loud typically. And it takes a while and you're like, oh my God, I'm so nervous. So Cruz comforts her. And honestly, he stayed strong for her because 2 of his children are dead. He keeps it together so that she doesn't break down further. He felt like she had already been through enough. Mrs. Magard Lavella arrives at the scene just after the police, and she sees Janice standing there, soaking wet, crying. And she rushes up, she hugs her, and she's like, "Oh my God, thank God you're okay. Are you all right? What happened? Where are Gwen and Boy Boy?" Cruz was the one to tell his wife and the mother of his children that their 2 kids were dead. Mrs. McGard Lavella is an elementary school principal. She was very loved for being this soft-spoken person. When you're an elementary school principal, you have to be calm, collected. You have to know what to do in the event of a crisis. You have to know how to handle these things. Kids, parents, staff, literally everyone trusted her to know what to do in every situation. But in this situation, there's like no answer. There's no solution. And it's said that Mrs. McGuad completely broke down in every sense of the word. She was a broken woman and a broken mother. And I think Cruz, seeing his wife break down to the core like this, he had been holding it in for Janice. I think just seeing the devastation in his wife, he broke down. And so the three of them, they're outside the house crying in each other's arms, and the McGuad house was taped off as a crime scene. The police were really busy inside. They found like an abundance of evidence in the living room, just scattered everywhere. There were a few different things that could have been used as murder weapons. So there was this bloody baseball bat, a hammer, a few kitchen knives, including the one near the front door, pans, pots, shattered glass bottles, and they had to log all the evidence, take it all in, and they tried to match the weapons with the injuries on the siblings. Gwen had been stabbed to death, and it seemed very personal. And we know this through all the cases that we've covered over the years, but when a killer stabs a person in the face, it's typically incredibly personal. There is a level of hatred and cruelty, and oftentimes it can indicate that it comes from a place of jealousy. Like, that's typically when you see that extensive injuries on the face and her chest and abdomen, but a lot of wounds on her face, which you don't see necessarily in all stabbing cases. So the chest and the abdomen and sometimes the back, those are pretty common areas.
Yeah, because face is not to kill, right?
Face is just so personal. And again, to ruin someone's face, a lot of experts believe it stems from jealousy. So keep it in mind later. Gwen was stabbed multiple times, just face, chest, abdomen. She was missing an ear. She had wounds all over her arms and hands, indicating that she fought till her very last breath. Her hair was completely matted with dried blood. Louis' body was just as bad. The police counted 51 stab wounds on his body. Let me repeat that. 51 stab wounds on a 16-year-old's body. How can anyone ever hate a 16-year-old so much to stab them, I mean, even once? But 51 times? Like, it doesn't make sense. Their bodies were so badly damaged, the morgue workers had to physically sew the teenagers back together before their parents could hold a funeral. The investigators that were looking into the case, their initial working theory is that, okay, attackers came into the McGuad house since, they're going off of Janice's statements as well as the evidence. Maybe the attackers, they were looking to target one of the better off families in the area. They most likely thought that the house was going to be empty, but they came across the 3 McGuad children and all hell broke loose. That was the running theory. That was the very initial theory. But when they're taking log of everything at the crime scene, just laying around in plain sight, there are so many objects of value. TVs, phones, laptops. I mean, if these are thieves that are willing to kill teenagers, innocent children, I feel like they would steal on their way out. And it's not like they were hearing police sirens on their way. So very quickly, the angle of burglary gone wrong, it was dropped. The next runner-up as a theory was a family dispute over land. So Lavella had siblings, and there have been reports prior that Lavella and her siblings had gotten into these fights over land. Maybe some of the siblings were jealous enough to hurt the McGuads? Maybe they thought that they could get the McGuads to hand over some land if their children were now dead? But the evidence wasn't adding up with that either. I'm sure the police checked the alibis and the motives because in the end they ruled that theory out too. So now they're out of options. The family, the public, they all want answers. I mean, this is terrifying to every single family in the area. I think whenever children are involved, it's a huge deal. And like, don't even get me started on what's going on in the US. But, when even children aren't safe, you feel like, what is wrong with society? Like, we need to do something drastic now. People are demanding answers and change. Like, they're in their homes. So the police, they form a special investigations unit focused on this crime, and the mayor puts up a reward for $5,000 for anyone with information that would lead to the arrest of the attackers. Meanwhile, the police go back to the crime scene. They're like, we gotta search through everything again. This is how we're gonna break this case wide open. They bring in forensics teams. They're combing through the place. And I'm not sure why they didn't follow up with some of these leads to begin with, but They finally decide, we gotta search the perimeter of the house. Not just inside the house, not just the living room, but like outside. And it's not just the backyard. They're going a little bit further than that. They're expanding their search scope. And that's when they come across this irrigation creek near the McGuad house. So it's like a small pond. And I guess since they weren't looking for a body or even a murder weapon, they just didn't think to search it until later. They got incredibly lucky. There in the creek was a little plastic bag. It felt like someone had tried to throw it down the creek and they assumed the water would carry it out, but the plastic bag got caught on a tree branch. So it's just stuck, swaying in the water. They drag it out and inside are bloody clothes. The killers after the murder had taken the time to change their clothes, put it in a little plastic baggie, tie it up, and throw it into the creek. Okay, now they're getting somewhere. So with this in mind, they're feeling a boost of confidence, okay? They start combing through the McGuad family house again, and they're searching for anything at all that might seem even remotely suspicious. Meanwhile, the netizens, they're doing their own little investigation. And the police, they explored the burglary gone wrong theory, the land dispute theory, but there was one theory that nobody really wanted to be the first to say. Do you know what I mean? I mean, it just feels almost politically incorrect. It feels wrong. It feels cancelable to be like, we think the survivor did it. Like, even just saying that, that's crazy, right? I mean, normally I'm like, don't say it then. If you think you're going to get canceled, don't say it because you're probably, like, don't come up with these theories.
Wait, did people think of that right away?
Yeah, like, netizens were like, I don't really want to say it. They're trying to, like, come up with roundabout ways of being like, well, there's a few parts. Nobody wants to be like, I think the survivor killed them. The netizens did have some strong points, though. And normally I'm against these types of theories because more often than not, they're not true and it just ends up hurting the survivor even more. But I'm going to walk you through some of the biggest points of contention. Point 1, the freaking bath. The bath, okay, this was the weirdest part. This is the part in the case where immediately my little radars are going off. Like, it's very strange. When Cruz, the father, found her in her room after he found his 2 children murdered in the living room, he was just so happy that she was alive. He was so happy that she wasn't injured. But she's soaking wet. And she explains to him, once the screams of her siblings stopped, she took a bath because she was so nervous. Again, what an oddly vulnerable position to put yourself in when there were just 3 homicidal attackers in your home. I think that's even a nightmare to most people. Being in a bath when intruders break in. You just don't feel safe and secured. That's why when you're like showering, you're trying to open your eyes and you're like, I gotta keep looking. Even Cruz said, when I heard that and when the shock of my kids passing wore off, I just couldn't stop thinking about that part. He didn't want to, but he couldn't help but wonder, like, why? Like, wouldn't a more natural reaction to be either run to your siblings' bodies, keep hiding under the bed until someone found you, or maybe even run out of the house? Netizens speculated in a very roundabout way initially that she took a shower to get all the blood off of her after she stabbed her siblings. Again, Louis was stabbed 51 times. That's just on his body. That's not including the injuries on Gwen's. Another point of contention was the fact that Janice didn't come downstairs when she heard Cruz yelling their names. The house isn't massive, and from where her bedroom was, I mean, she could hear him banging on the front door, screaming the kids' names, running around to the back of the house. She didn't even scream back. She didn't alert him that she was in the house. Nothing. She stayed hidden, and she didn't come out until she heard him come across his children's bodies in the living room. But there's bigger points to be made. The third point is the room that Janice hid in was ransacked. She said the attackers entered the room and they just didn't see her hiding under the bed, and they ransacked her entire room. I don't know. It's just kind of weird. And the house really isn't that big, so if she ran away when the attackers were already inside the house, wouldn't at least one of the 3 attackers had seen her run to her room? And one of the first places you would check is underneath the bed. So they just go into her room, ransack the room, and think, you know what? I'm sure she's not going to tell anyone what happened. It's weird. Also, she stated that she locked herself in the room and then hid under the bed. If the door was locked from the inside, how did the room get turned inside out? There were also droplets of blood that were inside of her room. And so she's arguing, yeah, because the attackers came into the room and ransacked the place, of course there's going to be droplets of blood because they were probably covered in blood, because look at how graphic the crime scene is. But it just wasn't making any sense. Then the last point of contention was Janice sent the message to her family group chat at 2:48 p.m., remember? After the autopsy, police discovered that the McGuad siblings' time of death was closer to 2 p.m. So what happened during those 50 minutes? This next one is a bit more speculative, but I'm still gonna go over it. A lot of netizens were wondering how she was able to post a Facebook post spelled 100% correctly and including emojis. So the Facebook post begging for help because there were intruders in the house, that post included emojis. Which is kind of strange. And on top of that, just a few minutes after posting on Facebook, she changed the last name to her profile to P, P-E-E. We don't know what P is. Her birth last name is Sibiel, and her adoptive last name is McGuad. I don't know what Janice P is.
Wait, after she made a post, she changed her last name?
Yeah, so you're telling me you're hiding under the bed, and there's 3 knife-wielding attackers downstairs murdering your siblings, and you're like, I need to update my Facebook name, like right now. I wonder, okay, this is, again, speculation time, but maybe in her 17-year-old mind, she thought that if her name wasn't Janice McGuad, the police couldn't find her profile. So, like, I think maybe she thinks the police are going to go and be like, oh, you know what, let me just investigate this whole family, and, okay, Janice McGuad types it in Facebook. There's no Janice McGuad.
Was it Janice McGuad
Yes,
before?
yeah.
Oh, okay. She's trying to hide her
I
name.
mean,
on
that's all they
Facebook.
can think of in a 17-year-old's head. Because obviously, they're going to find you regardless.
Yeah, okay.
But I'm trying to think like a 17-year-old because it's so random. For now, these are just netizen theories and arguments. Meanwhile, the police would find droplets of blood in rooms of the house that just didn't make sense. Like the laundry room. There were droplets of blood there. But the laundry room shows no sign of struggle or anything. So the killers just like walked in there, spattered some blood around from their clothes, and then walked out. Now, the police believe that they do an exhaustive search of the house and the crime scene tape comes down. And the McGuads were allowed back into their home to clean and tidy up. And I guess figure out what they wanted to do with the place. Mrs. McGuad felt like a zombie in this house. So while the police were investigating, all she did was cry and grieve and scream and then crawl up in a ball and then wait for the wave of emotions to hit again. And now she's back in the house. She's like, I just want to stay busy so that these floodgates don't open. She starts tidying up the areas, and she starts with Janice's room. It's been ransacked, so this is Louie's old room. Mrs. McGuad starts going through and cleaning up, and she stumbles across an ID. She's never seen this ID before. It doesn't belong to her children. She rushes to hand it over to the police, and since the ID belonged to a 17-year-old male, his name has not been identified to the press, but he's often referred to as Marlon, which is a pseudonym. Lavella did not know Marlon. She had never seen Marlon before in her entire life, so why is his ID in her house? Her neighbors had seen him before, though. The day of the murders, a few eyewitnesses came forward to say that they saw Marlon heading towards the McGuad residence. And it wasn't just neighbors. A store owner that was asked said Marlon came in and asked him which house belonged to the McGuads. A motorcycle driver said that he even drove Marlon to the McGuad house that day.
What?
So the police, they finally have their first big lead. And since Marlon's ID was found in Janice's room, they bring her in and they start questioning her. And when I say questioning, I mean that in the lightest sense possible. They're not interrogating her. They're just like, hey, we found this ID in your room. Do you recognize it? Like, do you know who this person is?
Wait, are they suspecting her at this
No.
point? Oh, okay.
They're just like, oh, like we found this in your room. Maybe it's Louise. Like maybe Louis had a friend, but we just want to know if you know. Just simply asking questions. And she's like, yeah, I know that person. They're kind of taken aback. I don't think that was the answer that they were expecting. They're like, oh, you know this guy? Yeah, I know him. And she breaks down and she says, I had something to do with the murders. In that interrogation room, in the presence of a lawyer, Janice admits that she and one other accomplice were the ones that murdered the McGuad siblings. Look, the admission itself was never released. All we know is that she admitted to it. But we don't know how active of a role she took. We don't know if she participated in the physical killing. I think most people suspect that she absolutely did, but we don't even know who her accomplice was, beyond the fact that everyone calls him Marlon. And that's not even like a nickname, that's just an online pseudonym for him.
But is he caught though?
Yeah, so
Oh.
her and the 17-year-old, they're both caught. We know that he's 17, he works for the church. He worked as the person that sets up the church hall before service begins. And that's really the extent of what we know about him. We don't even know how the two met, what kind of relationship that they had. Netizens suspect that they were dating, which normally that sounds like a good theory, right? But it's weird because Janice's Facebook, she had pictures with another guy that she would refer to as her boyfriend, and it's not Marlon, apparently. Speaking of Janice's boyfriend, the police were able to track him down. Janice's Facebook, they were dating, which normally for the church. He worked as the person that sets up the church hall before service begins. And that's really the extent of what we know about him. We don't even know how the two met, what kind of relationship that they had. Netizens suspect that they were dating, which normally that sounds like a good theory, right? But it's weird because Janice's Facebook, she had pictures with another guy that she would refer to as her boyfriend, and it's not Marlon, apparently. Speaking of Janice's boyfriend, the police were able to track him down. They questioned him, make sure that he's not involved somehow. He wasn't. But he did say something that struck me as really weird, really interesting. He said that he saw Janice's Facebook post that day of her freaking out that there were intruders in the house. He saw it. He called her. She actually picked up the phone. But she didn't answer. She didn't respond. It was just like silent on the other line. He didn't hear any strange noises or anything like that, so after a few seconds of silence, he just hung up. He assumed that nothing really bad was happening, like maybe she was being dramatic. Okay, so this was odd to me. It strikes me as so strange. Either this guy is a really boyfriend, the world's worst boyfriend, or maybe Janice has a history of making bizarre claims or being dramatic. Like it's just really strange behavior. I can't imagine a world where your loved one or anyone posts like that on social media and you're just like, oh, well, it was silent when I called them. They're probably fine. Unless it's frequent? I don't know. The police immediately track down Marlon. They find out that he has a record. He was caught with illegal drugs not too long ago, and there wasn't even a chance to deny his connection with the McGuad murders because they found Gwen's phone in his bag when they arrested him. Now, this is where the case starts getting really, really strange. So at first, this was looking like a final girl situation, which, if you guys know the final girl trope, it's a trope in slasher movies, horror movies, where one final girl at the end survives and she either confronts the killer or she lives to tell the tale. So a lot of people thought that this was like a final girl situation, but it went from that to being compared to the movie Orphan. Do you know which one I'm talking about? It's about this husband and wife who adopt a 9-year-old girl after they lose their baby. But the 9-year-old turns out to be a 33-year-old woman who is just hell-bent on killing the entire family. Side note, I know the movie Orphan was very controversial. A lot of adoption groups hated the depiction of murderous adoptees. And I think that there was even speculations that it affected adoption numbers for like a year or two. I don't think I can really give input on that or anything involving adoption because I don't know, I guess I was always in the belief that adoption is really good, but then recently I was seeing TikToks of adoptees saying that they feel a lot of resentment towards adoption centers and groups and their adoptive parents, and I'm like, okay, I know nothing about this world to say anything, but this case has been compared to the real-life Orphan, and I just want to put a disclaimer. Just like any other case, there's bad people everywhere. Like, you're gonna take a group of people, you're playing a numbers game. There's gonna be an evil man, an evil woman, an evil adoptee, an evil religious leader, an evil politician. They're all kind of evil in that little area, but you know what I mean. So don't take this case or any case as like, oh, this is why I'm scared of these people or these situations. So anyway, people pointed out the similarities between this case and the movie. Both girls were adopted by a family that was kind-hearted, financially stable. Both girls disguised their hatred and jealousy with like this super fake, sweet facade. But the similarities kind of end there. Janice is not an adult. Janice was a minor when she committed those crimes. So she was a child who killed 2 other children, just so that she could be the only child left.
Is that it? That's it?
That's the theory. We're gonna get to it. So, I mean, again, I do see why people keep comparing the 2 cases. It's human nature to draw these connections, but I will say, unlike the movie, Gwen and Louis were very real. Like, these are real people. So the McGuads thought Janice was a troubled orphan, looking for a chance at a better future, right? That's what they thought. But she wasn't even an orphan. Her parents weren't dead. They didn't abandon her. They weren't gone. In fact, she was still in contact with her mom at the point that she was adopted by the McGuads. Okay, Janice was born to a pretty rough environment, though. That much was true. Her parents, Michelle and Juanito, they didn't have much. Most of their meals growing up as a family consisted of just eating sweet potatoes, not even 3 times a day, like maybe once every 4 days just to feel full. Sometimes they would eat sweet potato leaves if they didn't have any more sweet potatoes left, or they would ask their neighbors and beg them for rice or eat almost rotten bananas. So Janice did not have a normal childhood. She was never carefree. Her dad was always getting drunk and upset that they didn't have money. And Janice was found on a boat in 2013. Now, it's hard to say if she was abandoned, like she claims, or if she left her family willingly. But she's found on the boat. She lies about not having parents. Maybe she was embarrassed. Maybe her parents were dead to her after everything that happened. I don't know. I think this part we can sympathize with, right? Like her childhood. And maybe even the fact that she lied to everyone about her parents abandoning her. In a way, maybe she did feel abandoned by that. Either way, it's speculated that she just wanted to be taken in by the McGuads. But all this trauma, all this hurt started resurfacing when she saw how loving the McGuad family was. She saw how they doted on Gwen and Louie, and they protected their kids and loved them and helped them grow into good people. And Gwen was beautiful, smart, kind, and it's suspected by netizens that Gwen was everything that Janice wanted to be. And so the more comfortable that Janice got with the privilege that the McGuad family could give her, the less content she was getting. The McGuads were loving, but they were strict. So when Janice was adopted, she got her own house duties and chores, just like Gwen and Louie had. And this isn't some like Cinderella situation where they're giving her all this work and they're like, you're the adopted kid, you better do it all. The McGuads were fair. The problem though was Janice was used to living by her own rules now. She just wanted all the positives of living with the McGuads. She didn't really care for the negative parts. She also saw how much the McGuad parents adored Gwen and Louie, and she didn't like that. But the crazy thing is, they gave Janice the same love. Like, from the minute that they adopted her, Janice was treated like a member of the family, to an extent where people around them thought that Janice was a cousin that they had taken in. But Janice was not content. She just wanted all of it. Mr. McGuad thinks that's the reason his children are dead. He said, based on her confession, she was jealous and envious, and she hated our daughter Gwen because of the love we showered her with. But the netizens are confused because even if she saw all the love Gwen is getting, she also has love. Like, love is not a finite resource. How can someone be greedy enough for something like parental affection to kill their siblings? To add weight to the theory of this motive, remember how she called the McGuad parents mom and dad for the first time the morning of the murders? Now in hindsight, that could allude to her jealousy and her belief that she would soon be their only daughter. Yeah. And I think it's the feeling of maybe Janice felt like she could never compete with Gwen and Louie, because these are the birth kids, and so maybe she felt like the only way to truly be their daughter was to get rid of the birth kids. So Janice admitted to being involved in the murders, and the theory of why she did it is still being debated, but I feel like up until this point, even for the McGuads, it felt, okay, it doesn't feel excusable or even understandable, but from a psychological standpoint, it seemed, like, you know what I mean? It kind of made sense psychologically.
Nice person.
Not in the sense that any murder makes sense. Like, all murders are senseless. But I guess psychologically speaking, everyone was like, I think I can connect the dots. I think I see where this is going. Everyone's like, oh, she's feeling this intense jealousy, never having loving parents. She wants all the love to herself. She's intensely jealous. This is the only way to not be in competition with the birth kids. She gets them out of the picture. That's what we thought. And then the police